simulation, it seems like we have a lot of
Wow.
features
Yeah,
six.
I mean,
Okay.
all right.
Okay, so we're gonna need.
Yeah, we might not even need that many then.
True. Over here.
Should we set, change the cushions up on this side too?
So, I'm not in charge of this.
Should we change the
now in
cushions on
charge.
this side?
False.
You're
You
not.
got caught holding the Zafu.
Yeah, I guess so, because otherwise people get confused and stare the wrong direction. We do need a G sheet though.
Was there a sheet?
Started, although it didn't. Just been, let me just choose one. I need to find the job. Yeah, we just treated it like a Sunday darn.
But I haven't figured out.
So now we take one of these?
Yeah, now you wanna put this one somewhere? So there. Extra back here.
So that should be good.
The top.
I'm trying to have fun.
Really?
You get your doctor's done?
Okay, can you scoot one way or the other just so I can see if this is, thank you. Well, and that's when the sun comes in, but you're welcome to sit and sit happen.
We go out this weekend? We go out this weekend?
Are you working?
No.
No, I quit.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't get that memo.
Okay.
So when was that?
October 14th.
No shit.
Sorry.
Good
Well, I
for you.
mean, I didn't make a big announcement.
Well, yeah.
Hey, everyone, I'm free.
Wait, why do-
Did you test the audio already?
It's been really good to be around more.
Nice.
Did you raise this up
I
there?
really don't want to get you.
I don't know, I don't think anybody,
There's
yeah, it
enough
would
to
just
do
be
here.
probably the person sitting here,
Transcribing.
that could be a problem.
To me, my business is just trying to fit in the song and forms and transcribing. I'm looking for jobs as a full-time
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, maybe I'll just quit. I'll just retire. I have no retirement.
If you're gonna be the one
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Basic Buddhist Teachings. Happy New Year, 2025. May it bring much good health, prosperity, and all those other wonderful things that we all hope and wish for. So tonight's Basic Buddhist Teachings is on the 6th precept. So here in the teachings that we practice here at Sokakoji, we have 16 precepts that when we receive jukai or receive precepts or decide to take, if we decide, but are called to take that step into this spiritual life in perhaps a more serious way, some of us request to receive jukai. And then, as if that's not enough, some of us feel like we have to move on to sewing a robe and becoming fully ordained. And we have any number of people here tonight that have taken that step, including myself 10 years ago. And so as we were ending the As It Is, the 6 o'clock meditation tonight, Sokuzan announced that the basic Buddhist teachings would be given by none other than, wow, this person sitting here, much to my surprise, although not particularly. So that was at 20 to 7. And here it is now, time for that event to take place. So this is a new year, at least if you believe in time. And if you don't, well, then it can be whatever you want it to be. 2025. And so it seems appropriate in this teaching of the 16 precepts that we practice here, that we study, that the one I'm landing on tonight is the 6th precept, which is no dwelling on past mistakes. So, but before I offer something on that, I'd like to just read the others, and I'll see if I can recite them from memory. The first 3 are the refuge vows. I return to Buddha, I return to Dharma, I return to Sangha. And then the 3 pure precepts: do good, don't do harm, and be with all things. And that third one probably is one of the most difficult to do, if we can even manage it. And then we have a long form of the precepts, which looks like this. The 10 grave precepts are called. So in its short form, the first one is no killing life, the second one is no stealing, the third one is no, I'm not gonna look, the third one is no attaching to fulfillment. The fourth one is no illusory words. The fifth one is no selling the wine of delusion. The sixth one, no dwelling on past mistakes. The seventh one, no praise or blame. The eighth one, no hoarding the materials or teachings. The ninth one, no being angry. And the 10th one, no abusing the 3 treasures. And for whatever reason, when I first really began to dwell on these precepts, especially the longer version, I started with number 10 because it was the shortest one. That's pretty easy. No abusing the 3 treasures. So what is that? No abusing Buddha is no asceticism. So no asceticism is no abusing Buddha. No standpoint is no abusing Dharma. Think about that one, no standpoint. And the third part of that, no abusing Sangha, is no self. So I started with that 10th one because it was so short, and then I found myself going backwards into the 9th one of no being angry. And then the 8th one, and then the 7th one, and then the 6th one, for some reason, I memorized no being angry, because that seemed to be what I was doing all the time, which is no being angry, beyond our limited conceptual realm, the realm of how we think things and situations ought to be. The boundless Dharma world is endlessly extending. Giving up our expectations on each moment and bowing to the richness of how things really are is no being angry. Well, I dwelt on that precept for quite a long time until I could just kind of rattle it off like I just did. But then, when I went into retreat at Karma Choling this fall in September for 10 days, something about the 6th precept grabbed me. The 6th precept, no dwelling on past mistakes. The way begins anew in each moment, and the opportunity to practice the way here and now. The opportunity to practice the way here and now is essentially unhindered by what has come before. To awaken again and again in the present and allow the past to fulfill itself naturally in this way is no dwelling on past mistakes. So let's look at that for a minute. And I can't really say as to what it was about that during my retreat, but it just kept coming up and coming up and coming up until the point where I did have it memorized. No dwelling on past mistakes. And as I said just a few minutes ago, this is a new year. And so I don't know about you, but sometimes I make a New Year's resolution and say, well, this year I'm going to really focus on fitness or exercise or getting up in the morning and practicing or whatever it may be. So you may have your own New Year's resolution, and it's something new. I mean, think about when you saw something new or felt something new. How was that for you? And so with the 6th precept, we have that opportunity, no dwelling on past mistakes. Well, that first line is problematical to a certain degree because we have that word mistake. And if you have been on this path for any number of weeks, months, years, minutes, you probably have run into the understanding that there are no mistakes. There's no past, there's no future, there's no present. Our teacher, Sokuzan, often reminds us of that. And so to say no dwelling on past mistakes can be problematical just to begin with. But we'll let that lie for a minute. The dwelling is, I think, a key word in this precept. No dwelling on past mistakes. And let's face it, we do live in a relative world. We do have to have some touchstone, it seems, or a reference point to the past. Otherwise, it seems like it would be difficult for us to remember that this is the zendo where we come and sit, or this is various Sangha members, or that we need to go to work at a certain place. So there is a relative need for past, but it's no dwelling on past mistakes. And then to look at the opening phrase, the way begins anew. So here we are again at this new year, the way. What is the way? In our understanding, it's this spiritual path. So this way, and of course the word Tao comes up too. The way begins anew in each moment. It doesn't say the way begins anew by remembering what happened last year or last week or last month. It doesn't say that the way begins anew by projecting what it's going to look like in the future. It says the way begins anew in each moment. And I don't know how that is for you, but that's a reminder here to me that even in this very instant when I am full of anger or disappointment or any of the negativities that can arise, that just by flashing on these first few sentences or these first few words, the way begins anew in each moment. We don't have to wait for the next moment. We don't have to correct what just went before. It's this moment, right now. And I don't know how it is for you, but when that precept, that opening phrase of that precept really gets to my heart, it like stops me in my tracks. It's very similar to another favorite slogan of mine, which is the only one I can remember of Atisha's 59 slogans, and that is, change your attitude and relax as it is. That's one of the translations. I know Nuala Clark and Crystal Gondrud in their new book about the 59 slogans have it worded slightly different, but for some reason that's the one I learned from Sokuzan many years ago. And it just resonates with me. So change your attitude and relax as it is. There's something about a kind of a command to it. And I find that I can turn that inward and say, okay, what is it that I'm now stuck on that I can't seem to resonate with that particular slogan or this precept? The way begins anew in each moment. And so it helps me to think about what is it that I'm stuck on? What negativity, particularly it's negativity, because when I'm happy, I don't think about this precept much. The way begins anew in each moment. And the opportunity to practice the way here and now. So that means even in my astrological mutability that I can change, even though there's no change, that the opportunity is there to arrest what it is that is occurring at this moment and look at it anew. Nice words, doesn't always work. But then what it encourages me to do is to look at, well, okay, what is it that I'm dwelling on? What is it I'm stuck on? What is it that I don't want to say yes to? When Sokuzan left the Tan at the end of As It Is and had announced that I would be giving the talk, he walks up to me as he passed by me and hands me this paper. And how am I supposed to say no to that? Well, I was tempted to. But when he gave me the option of either the 6th or the 7th precept, well, I knew that I was home free because I know the 6th precept. I tried to remember the 7th, which is no praise or blame, but that's a little too close to home. And so I figured, okay, I'm safe with the 6th one. But the 7th one, no praise or blame, is only Buddha action. There's only Buddha action. One robe covers all. To know that there's no one to be harmed and no one to harm, no one to benefit and no one to be benefited is no praise or blame. So I don't know that one very well, except in actuality. So I retreat into the 6th one. And it's usually those first few words that have the ability or have the power, shall I say, to snap me back into my thought process, which is usually dwelling on some past mistake or some past complaint or something I don't like, or the way the world is treating me or not treating me, or the way things are. I don't like it. I don't want to bow to the richness of how things really are. What is that about? All I have to do is look at the news every morning and say, Gaza, how am I supposed to bow to the richness of that? How is that perfection? But I think the whole point is that it brings us back into what it is that we need to look at, which, as Sokuzan often tells us, starts here. I don't know how it is for you, but that's very difficult for me to look at what's right here, to see what it is I'm dwelling on, and then how does that dwelling perhaps infect other people or other beings that I can't even see. There's an energy about it that just can permeate. And am I violating then the second precept of am I not doing harm? Am I doing harm with those kinds of angry thoughts, negativity? And wouldn't it be easier just to extend a hand to the world? So no dwelling on past mistakes. The way begins anew in each moment, and the opportunity to practice the way is essentially unhindered. How do we hinder our understanding? How do we hinder our way of acting in the world? How do we hinder other people that we come in contact with? And what is it to hinder something? Is that saying no to what's being presented to us? Is it saying no to an invitation to really extend, to change our attitude and relax as it is? The way begins anew in each moment, and the opportunity to practice the way here and now. It doesn't say tomorrow, it doesn't say next week, it doesn't say yesterday. We regret we didn't practice yesterday. So Kazan often asks us, well, how much are you sitting? We had people tonight asking about their sitting practice, and I was surprised that he didn't ask, well, how much are you sitting now? We want his interpretation, his judgment about, am I sitting enough? And if I am, how would you know that? Would I be different? So the opportunity is essentially unhindered here and now by what has come before. And so if we're dwelling on past mistakes, what are we hindering in terms of what's right in front of us at this moment? No dwelling on past mistakes. The way begins anew each moment, and the opportunity to practice the way here and now is essentially unhindered by what has come before. And then this next 5 words, to awaken again and again. Is that 5? To awaken again and again. In the present, right now, as it is, right now. To awaken again and again in the present. And allow the past to fulfill itself naturally in this way is no dwelling on past mistakes. And I think I recently dwelt on this precept in one of the talks I gave, and I remember Jun Shu's question to me. And I have thought about it ever since you asked. What is it to allow the past to fulfill itself in this way? And I asked Sokuzan, or I think he maybe offered, and I can't remember what he said, and so I keep going back to it. What does this mean? To awaken, I know what it's like to awaken. I mean, every morning so far, I got up, I'm here, I go about my day, so I know what that kind of awakening is. But what is it to awaken here and now? Or to awaken again and again in the present? I think it goes back to that first phrase, the opportunity to practice the way here and now is essentially unhindered. The way begins anew each moment, and the opportunity to practice the way is essentially unhindered. And therefore, we can awaken again and again and again and again and again. And so rather than beating ourselves up because we can't seem to awaken 2 minutes ago, we can do it now. We can awaken now. That's the promise. That's the precept anyway. To awaken again and again in the present. is these, to awaken again and again in the present. And I've just lost it. Help me out here. To awaken again and again in the present.
Read it.
And allow the past. And allow the past to fulfill itself naturally in this way. Is no dwelling on past mistakes. Okay.
So what does it mean to allow the past to fulfill itself? You've had plenty of time to contemplate that. What does it mean?
How that comes to me is, it goes back to the beginning. There's no dwelling on past mistakes. And to recognize, perhaps, acknowledge what has gone before, that there have been a past in this relative world. Yes.
So if one, did you say something about awaken again and again? How did you say that?
That's to awaken again and again
Okay.
in the present.
Okay, so if, is there a possibility that one could just be awake and not have to awaken?
You say don't maintain, so I would say probably not. We have to awaken again and again.
Thank you.
Other questions? Nishikai.
Nishikaban, what does it mean to awaken?
I think, they're literally, you can open your eyes, and we are constantly taught by Sokuzan and by the teachings, the Buddha, open your eyes. That's what we do when we meditate, right? We open our eyes, we don't, unless you fall asleep like I do, then you close your eyes, but then you awaken. And so it is to look at what's right in front of us, again and again and again. And then for me, it's looking at, well, what is a thought? And usually there are a multitude of thoughts that are then arising. And so now I have to look at those thoughts. And so it can become very personal to awaken again and again. Or when something is occurring, a situation is occurring, a transaction with another person, with a group of people, in a sangha, in the world that we live in, what is it to awaken and see what is there? I think it has many, it can be very expansive. And so it may be just looking at the reality that's right in front of us and then trusting with this practice, we know what to do. We know what action to take. And we find ourselves moving in that appropriate direction. But I don't think, as Sokuzan reminds us, it's not something to maintain, that we, that's why, I don't know, that's why we have the precepts, at least. It's a reminder. Yes.
Nishikaban, can you say more about how we know what to do?
The way it shows up for me is, and I was talking to Elena when I picked her up at the airport. I asked her, well, what are you doing here? She's been here before a few years ago. And it was kind of that. She said, well, if you don't mind my saying so, it's a knowing. It's just a knowing. I just know. And I think for me, it's, if I start to second guess myself or offer excuses, or it's usually, again, to go back to Chogyam Trungpa, the first thought, best thought thing, where for me, a first thought will come up and then I'll squish it and say, oh no, it can't be that, or no, I can't move in that direction, no, that's too hard. And so it would be more like allowing that awakening to take place without a cover-up. Other questions? Yes, Miyoko.
Milka bowing. Sometimes a dwelling, something I dwell on looks like a big slab of beef. It's juicy. I want to just sit there in it. I don't want to get rid of it. What do we do so that it doesn't become a hindrance?
Probably chomp on it quite a bit. And to use Sokuzan's words, of course, in his constant teaching, it's about awareness. So just that you can see what you're chomping on, or that big. It feels good sometimes, doesn't it, to just kind of, immerse ourselves in that gunk. I know it does for me. That's why it takes me 2 days sometimes to see that I don't need to dwell on that anymore. And then it's very embarrassing. And I guess I look at it too as a way to be kind to ourselves. Sokuzan's constantly telling us that there's nothing to fix. The teachings tell us there's nothing to fix, that this is the great perfection. And if it weren't, then there would be no room for what you're just talking about, would there? I'm not supposed to think that way. I'm not supposed to behave that way. I'm not supposed to do this. I wish I could do that. And that must be maybe some other universe. But this one seems loaded with that kind of thing.
Milka bowing. What makes the past part of that dwelling so sticky?
I think it's the habituation, it's the fixation, it's comfortable, it's something that we're familiar with. And another thing, just recently, I've been listening to a book called How Emotions Are Made. And it's written by a neuroscientist. Very interesting. I've got it on Audible, it's about 14 hours long, and I'm down to about 2 hours of it now. But it has opened up some perspective for me on emotions and how they're made. And so I'm as much as I hate it, I don't want to look at this stuff. I want it, I like the stickiness. And so there's something very comforting, something very familiar, something very habituated about that kind of, I don't know what past mistake or past. We could just leave the word mistake off and just say past. So I think that's part of it. And this particular book, from at least a neuroscientific standpoint, has, I think, some information that's been valuable to look at. So,
Udov has a question.
yes, my Dharma Sagittarian sister monk.
You bowing. And I used to think of this precept as dwelling on my own past mistakes. Is it different? What is the difference in dwelling on those or dwelling on others' mistakes? How does it show up for you, Bowing?
I dwell on those too. That's a really good question, because it brings into the conversation or the discussion or the teaching, the whole idea of past. I mean, how could we even have the Buddhist teachings if there were no past, from a very literal standpoint anyway? And the Buddhist teachings, this path is littered with murder, with hatred, and yet here we still are, looking at what the Buddha saw when he spent 6 years sitting, supposedly, and he woke up to the truth that everything is perfect, but there's suffering. Yes.
You're bowing. I have another question that you mentioned a bit in the beginning is, what is a mistake? How do we determine that something was a mistake given our teaching of no mistakes, Bowing?
I think we just need to look at it and really dissect, because for me, when I dwell on that, what I look at as a past mistake, then it puts me back into what Miyoko was just bringing up, that habituation or the fixation. And, you know, one of the sayings that we've trademarked of Sokuzan's is, don't miss your life. And so it seems that when we're so engrossed in that kind of past mistake, that we can be missing what's right in front of us. Now, that's not to say that there isn't something that needs to be looked at, and perhaps some kind of action needs to be taken, or understanding needs to be brought forward. I'm not totally dismissing the whole idea of mistake, and that, you know, as we're reminded, we're in a relative world, and there are things that need to be looked at. But I think it's the willingness to take a look at those things. And then if it is personal, we might need some help from someone else that can help us see more clearly. Other questions? Shoto.
Shoto bowing. I was curious when you suggested dropping the word mistakes off and just looking at past. I'm wondering if that lets us look like, are there ways we dwell on the past that aren't negative that we can look at, bowing?
Oh, I think so. You know, I have past memories that are really enjoyable to think about. Can you get me a little closer to what it is you're asking?
Sure, bowing. When does it become dwelling? Bowing.
It seems to me that when it takes on, I guess I'm going to call it a negative sort of attitude, that tends to sink me into a habituation that I call it a tranche. That's probably the wrong usage, but I like that word. It's something very deep, or the abyss, and that is just, I just can't be kind of coaxed out of. It's almost like it has a life of its own that I have to see it. So it turns into kind of a positive thing in a way. Yes.
Shoto bowing. I'm curious about how I feel like it's easy to recognize when we're going down into that pit as kind of a dwelling, but can that dwelling show up as like expressing itself? Or I'm looking at how Sokuzan talks about pride and shame, kind of an uplifted and a down energy of the same situation. Is there something going on like that in the past when we enjoy the stuff that's coming up?
I think so. I'm not quite sure what it is, what the comparison is with the pride and shame. And does it have to do with the word mistake? Is that what you're looking for?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, everybody knows what the old adage is. Well, how did you get here? How did you, and we don't need to go into your past, but how did you get here? And had it not been for those past mistakes, would you be sitting here today? I think all of us probably has a time in our life when we could look at that and say, well, yes, that was really not such a good thing to be doing, or it harmed maybe someone, and yet here I am being given a spiritual path that can perhaps open up to really understanding what it is and how this is the great perfection, and how I can participate in that in a beneficial way. Don't do harm, do good, and be with all things. Yes?
Shoto bowing. I think one more. At the very beginning, you said think you said like these are the precepts that we practice here, and I was curious to hear that word. Like I've heard like observe the precepts, but how do we practice the precepts going?
It seems to me that we practice them when someone receives jukai. We practice them when someone becomes ordained. We are practicing it's like we're embodying the precepts. Or maybe this isn't the right word, but we're being a witness with this generous understanding and the words of this teacher from 2,500 years ago, and all the lineage holders to the current one comes forward. So that's how I see it as a practice. And maybe observe is a better word, but it seems to come alive. Other questions? Chokodao?
Chokodao bowing. Do you have a sense of how this precept supports the practice of receiving?
I would say that it's all about receiving. If we're not dwelling on past mistakes, and it helps me see that. Well, for me, receiving is saying yes, and I have a hard time saying yes any number of times in this practice and on this spiritual path, at least in the way I think I should say yes.
Jen Ziegler?
Yes. Jen.
Jen Bowing, thank you. You mentioned the great perfection, and I'm wondering, what does perfection mean to you, to us? Bowing.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess I would use a synonym, call it Buddha nature. When I consider, I know Sokuzan teaches this, the lineage teaches this, the Buddha teaches this. It's like in this very moment, this is the great perfection. It's as if there's nothing to be added, nothing to be taken away. And yet for me, the heartbreak of the world it's like in the precept number 9 of no being angry, bowing to the richness of how things really are. I'm just speechless. It's difficult, and that word perfection just seems unreachable. And so I guess what I find myself is just trusting, well, this is what the great masters have seen, so I guess I'll keep going. Maybe I'll see it too.
Take a final question, then we can close.
Final question, Mozuku?
Mozuku bowing along the lines of the great perfection, what is your understanding of only Buddha activity exists?
Yeah, from no praise or blame. It's the same. It's the great perfection. Only Buddha activity exists. I mean, how can we, sure we have perpetrators, we have the legal system, we have the relative world that we have to live in. And I guess just considering only Buddha activity exists, for me it's another way of looking at something that maybe can help us see, are we stuck somewhere? Which will go to the 10th precept with the Dharma, no standpoint. And Sokuzan teaches us all the time, no reference point. You don't need to know. And can you live your life with no standpoint? What is it that you're absolutely stuck on that you are not going to budge? And so that's where I go with the only Buddha activity there's only Buddha activity, then the next line, one robe covers all. So it's not like everybody has to be a Buddhist, but that doesn't negate that that's the understanding I have of the world. Sometimes I get an image of this, our neighborhood here, this Sangha, of a great white tent, just like covering a whole neighborhood. It's just something that shows up for me every now and then, especially when we do the closing protection chant and appeal to all beings everywhere, light beings. To me, that's one robe covers all. Nothing's left out, nothing's forgotten. There's room for everything. It's just, is there room for everything in my heart? That's the big question. Thank you very much.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho san shi shi fu shi song bu sa mo ko sa mo ko the 10 directions, the 3 times, all Buddhas, all Venerable Ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokokoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.